Now, if you're in a long distance marriage right now, or you know someone that's in a long distance marriage, or you are thinking or considering long distance marriage, there are certain questions that you need to ask yourself. But the first question you should be asking yourself is, what we are gaining, is it worth the things that we are losing? Hello and welcome to Sacred Seasons with Fumi. If today is your first time of seeing my face, you're welcome. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you like it here. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for coming back. It's been a minute. And let me just take the time to apologize for my silence. I'm back now and I hope I'm forgiven. I hope my apology is accepted. I've been doing a lot of thinking while I was away of what would be the best way to come back, and I have a beautiful conversation that I know that you would love to have, a conversation that people, not many people have, and it's quite niche because it applies to certain, times of your life. I'm going to be sharing a season of my life where I had to do marriage long distance. The difference this time around is not just an episode, it's going to be a whole series. I'm hoping to talk about everything long distance, the good, the bad, the hard, the ugly wuggly, and all those kind of things that people do not say out loud. So just a little bit of background. I have been married for a little above 14 years, and 11 years plus of those 14 years I did long distance. Now, before that time, bear in mind, I had never lived alone. Like, even, while I was in university, I stayed in the hostel. I had roommates while I was serving. So in Nigeria, there's a compulsory 1-year youth service. I still did not live alone. I lived alongside other youth coppers. That's what they called us at the time. So I had never lived alone. I remember, before I got married, I used to feel like, when my husband, if I get married and my husband is to travel, maybe on an official assignment, even if it was just a few days, I would go with him. How ignorant, So it wasn't something I planned would happen. It wasn't the way I saw my life. However, life happened and that became my reality. So before the marriage, we did long distance relationship, my husband and I, but the relationship did not prepare me for what I experienced. Long distance marriage. So I say that to say that the conversation we'll be having is not just something that I read from a book. It's my lived experience and the experience of other people that I have observed and that I have spoken to. So I think a good place to start will be to even ask, what exactly is long distance marriage? Simply put, it's married but living single. And I know that there are very different ways that people would analyze that statement, but it's just basically you're married to someone, but you're living in two separate locations. And it differs for different people. I know spectrum is one word that has been bastardized, but I would say that there is a spectrum of long distance marriage. There are people that are married and maybe they are in the same country. There are people married and are in different continents or different countries, or in the same country and different states or borough or whatever it is they call it where you are. So you have that as well. There are people that don't see their families for maybe some people once a year, some once in 2 years, some in a few months. And like in my case, long distance marriage, what it looked like for me was that my husband was away every 2 weeks, and we did that consistently for 11 years, except when he was on annual leave. I used to joke about it that if I had been married at the time for 11 and a half years, I had truly been married for about 5.5 years because my husband was away for the other times. And there are different reasons why people find themselves in long distance marriage. And it's not because they sat down, like my case, to say, oh, this is how I want to live my life. A few people that I've had conversations with will tell you that they told themselves that they would never find themselves in this situation where they will be married but living single. I even I spoke to someone who said while she was young, she had an experience where her dad was away somewhere, working somewhere, and they had to be with mom for a few months. It wasn't very long, but it left an indelible mark, if I can use that word, in her mind that At that point, she decided, no, this is not for me. This is not what I'm going to do. However, again, life happened and she found herself doing long distance marriage. Long distance marriage is quite nuanced, and I will explain what I mean, in the sense that globally there is really no statistics that tells you that your marriage does better or worse because it's long distance. There are very divided mindsets or ideologies about whether long distance marriage works or it doesn't work, back and forth. People have different opinions of it. I can't remember the exact time in my marriage, but I was having a conversation with an older friend, and she seemed to suggest that I was enjoying marriage, or I had marriage easy because I was doing it long distance. What she was saying was more like saying that I had a prolonged honeymoon period. And she's not the only person that thought that way, because in popular culture, you realize that long distance marriage has been romanticized, as in people often ignore, the daily grind, the emotional strain, and they focus on the intense, passionate reunions that you have. And that's okay. That's their opinion. I was reading about another person that was talking about his parents. I don't know if it's his or her parents that did long distance. The father was a sailor. According to him, the father was away 10 months and then he comes back 2 months. And he said they did that for 25 years. And their marriage was absolutely fine. He said that what actually broke the marriage, according to his own analysis, was when they decided to live together. Now, that brings us back to the nuance that I was talking about. It is arguable that the reason why they couldn't live together is because they had lived apart for too long. However, this person did not see it this way. He felt that the reason why the marriage didn't work out was because they decided to close the gap. But for me, it's quite different, to be honest. And like I said, it's not like you're right, I'm wrong. Like I said, I'm sharing my experience. Personally, long distance for me is not cute. Long distance is not romantic. Long distance is not even what I will personally advise, except you absolutely have no choice. And I have a reason for my stance. Okay, I'm a Christian. And most things that I would do, in my life, and that's what it's meant to be, I draw from scripture. I strongly believe that family, they are not meant to live apart. I believe that God created, one of the reasons why God created marriage is for companionship. And of course, in Genesis, the Bible says that God said that it is not good for a man to live, to be alone, and then he made for him a helpmate. So I believe that the idea for family is to be in the same space, and for people, looking from outside, a lot of people think that the challenge with long distance marriage is about just missing someone. And trust me, missing someone is a big deal. I'm not going to say it is, it doesn't make sense or it's small. However, there are more issues that you grapple with when you're living, when you're having a long distance marriage. You have to deal with the emotional strain. You have to deal with taking decisions sometimes alone when your partner is not physically present. You have to deal with loneliness. You have to deal with solo parenting. I like to call it lead parenting, where you're the lead parent, as far as your children are concerned. You have issues with carrying responsibilities alone sometimes. You have issues with missing small everyday moments that make up and build a marriage. For example, maybe when something happened yesterday and I was just laughing and telling my husband about it. My daughter went to school and came back, and so while she was in school, her teacher called me to say, oh yeah, while she was playing, something happened, but she wasn't hurt, and just for information purpose. And when I picked her up from school, she said, oh, Mom, were you called? I said, yes, and we just bantered about it. And then her dad came back from work and she ran to the door to open the door for him. And the first thing she was saying was, oh, Daddy, the school called Mommy, da, 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 da. Now, again, I'm going to say nothing happened. But as small as that moment was, the fact that she could run to her father and tell him what happened in school that day, which if it were to happen over the phone after the whole day's work, it would have been overrun by, she might have forgotten because events might have overtaken, that information. So little things like that, or even very big things and big events like missing. I can't count how many wedding anniversaries we spent apart, birthdays. We even had a situation where our last child was born and my husband could not make it just because, our calculations did not really work out the way we planned it in our head. So by the time the baby came, he wasn't around. So big things like that, there are costs to this thing. And the thing is, a lot of times people don't understand the real cost of long distance marriage until they are actually in it. The constant adjustments that you have to make. Because I remember then when my husband used to tell me that he has to kind of rewire his mind when he comes home and do the same when he goes to work. And, at a point, I started noticing it. While he's at home, the last day or the last 2 days before he goes back, he is emotionally detached. He's trying to prepare himself for work because he knows he's not going to see us for the next 2 weeks. And he needed to be like that to be able to be productive at work. Can you imagine the emotional labor it takes? These are things that people do not speak about. So what that means for me is that if I'm going to have my husband at home with me for 14 days, 2 out of those 14 days, he is physically there, but he's emotionally distant because he needs to cope. He needs to go back to work and be productive. He cannot go back to work and be so soaked up in, I'm missing home, I'm missing home, I'm missing home, so much that he might even make mistakes at work. Those are the real issues that people, have to deal with constantly when they are married and their partner is living in another place. Now, if you're in a long distance marriage right now, or someone that's in a long distance marriage, or you are thinking or considering long distance marriage, there are certain questions that you need to ask yourself, as you go along, because I want to believe that where you are right now, let's assume you have never even thought about, how do I cope with this? How do I get out of this? Or all of those things. And that's why it's a series, because we're going to be talking about a lot of things. I'm going to mention the things we'll be talking about at the end. But the first question you should be asking yourself is, what we are gaining, is it worth the things that we are losing? That's very profound, because you need to redefine success for yourself. And I believe you will hear me say that, severally on this series. What exactly are we doing? That's a question you should be asking. What are we building? How long are we doing this for? You need to ask those questions. And it's not a question that one person is asking and the other person doesn't understand. You need to sit down. What's driving us? What's the purpose of what we are doing? Because to be honest, long distance marriage should not be a lifestyle. It should be for a season, in my opinion, and it should be for a specific reason. Because if you don't have a reason for long distance marriage, or if you don't have an end goal in mind, then you are in a trap. You are trapped. You're there. You're trapped. And the longer you stay in long distance marriage, the longer it is for you to reconnect. So I'd say, again, ask yourself these questions. Know where you're going. And hopefully by the time we meet by the next video, we will move this conversation forward. So if this is your situation right now, can you please comment down below to just let me know, I'm in a long distance marriage. If you don't mind sharing, let me know how long you've been married long distance, and what your opinion was about long distance before you actually started experiencing it. So in this series, let me just tell you what to expect. We're going to be talking about what makes long distance marriage work. We're going to talk about the real cost of long distance marriage. We're going to be talking about long distance marriage and parenting. We're going to talk about long distance marriage and finances. We're going to be talking about long distance marriage for me, my experience, what it was like in Nigeria, when we were both in Nigeria, and then when I was away and my husband was back in Nigeria, because it was 2 different experiences. We're going to be talking about what long distance marriage is like for how different parties, like the husband and wife, how they experience long distance marriage differently. So yes, and there are many more that will come on, but I just needed you to give you a sneak peek of what to expect. So yes, whatever else you think we should talk about as far as long distance marriage is concerned, please comment down below. So if you have listened to this and this has spoken to you and you're not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. If you know someone that is in a long distance marriage or that is planning to go into a long distance marriage, please share this video with them and ask them to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed having this conversation, and I know we'll have a lot more fun. See you in the next video.